Hi everybody, and welcome to this revision video which goes through fatigue and its effects as part of the psychological health and well-being topic for stage 2 psychology. Let's get started. So fatigue is different to just normal tiredness. So fatigue is defined as sleepiness which causes someone to have much more chance of falling asleep and have impaired cognitive performance on a task. So just being tired is, a part of life, but when we're tired, there's no real risk of us falling asleep accidentally. Whereas if someone is fatigued, there is a very high chance that they will fall asleep accidentally or without them being aware. So fatigue is very, very intense sleep debt and sleep deprivation and can be quite dangerous, as we will find out in this video. So we'll look at how obviously that's related to the road toll and shift work and workplace accidents. So symptoms of fatigue include excessive yawning, very sore, heavy eyes, blurred vision, and again, microsleeps. So I'll talk about microsleeps in a bit more detail later on in this video, but that is when our brain will go into sleep mode without our permission because it is so sleep deprived. It needs the sleep as a biological need, especially when we're doing something monotonous like driving or a boring task. So because of that, fatigue is a major factor in the increase in the road toll. So there's been several instances, unfortunately, where people have been in very serious or fatal car accidents because they have fallen asleep behind the wheel. So fatigue can cause people, again, to fall asleep or have slowed reaction time on the road. It's very, very common in long-distance truck drivers. However, it can affect everyone. So if someone is very severely sleep deprived with a lot of sleep debt and they get behind the wheel of a car, fatigue can obviously strike them just like anybody else. So the most likely time to have an accident are in the early hours of the morning, okay, because again, this is typically when we are at our most sleepy, so between 2 and 4 a.m., and in the early afternoon between 1 and 4 p.m., because as we know from looking at circadian rhythms, this is when we have our afternoon lull where our melatonin levels rise again because of the evolutionary theory that we should be napping at this time. So if someone is very, very sleep deprived, they're more likely to fall asleep at these times. And if they're behind the wheel of a car at a time, that's obviously a huge cause for concern. So government bodies have taken measures to reduce accidents caused by fatigue. They've installed rumble strips to vibrate the car violently to wake somebody up if they start to veer off the side of the road or into the middle of the road. They've also installed several rest areas on the side of roads as well. This is very typical on very long, monotonous, boring highways to allow people to pull over every 2 hours to take a break, have something to eat, stretch their legs, maybe have a power nap, and reduce the likelihood of falling asleep behind the wheel. So there's several advertisements about microsleeps that make people more aware of the signs of fatigue. So a microsleep is a brief unintended loss of attention, which most often occurs when a very tired person, is performing a monotonous task such as driving. So there are several ways to reduce the impact of fatigue. So this includes obviously getting enough sleep the night before going on a road trip, arranging overnight accommodation so you're not driving through the night between those critical hours of 2 and 4 a.m., avoiding alcohol and medications which induce drowsiness before getting behind the wheel, and taking 15-minute breaks every 2 hours. There's also a lot of technology in cars at the moment that will actually recognize that the driver is driving for more than 2 hours and will actually alert the driver that it's time to pull over and it's time to have a rest, which is good. So we've seen these campaigns as well. I'm sure you've seen these on billboards and on TV and, different advertisements around the place. So tired, take a break in a safe place. There's the Stop, Revive, Survive campaign. This is also linked then to shift work. So typically people who have high fatigue and need to drive also do shift work. Not everyone, but it is typical of shift workers. So shift work is a common example of something that can affect people's sleep-wake circadian rhythm, as we've already talked about in my sleep deprivation video. People who have constantly different shift times are the most affected by this. So if they've got constantly changing day shifts, night shifts, where their hours are all over the place, they're going to be more negatively affected by fatigue. Typically, they suffer from poor sleep quality and quantity and reduced night alertness and are more likely to have accidents again on the road or in the workplace. So it's very important that shift workers maintain and manage their shift work by doing several strategies. So ways to minimize the negative impact of shift work. Where possible, I know this isn't always possible, but where possible, changing shifts as infrequently as possible. Often shift workers will get a roster in advance, usually 2 weeks in advance, so they can then manage their shifts ahead of time and be able to prepare for it rather than it being, inconsistent with very short notice. So changing shifts as infrequently as possible is a good strategy. And in many industries, that's actually the law. All right, so it's up to the bosses and it's up to the industry to make sure that the shifts are not all over the place and are not changed very, very frequently. Shift workers can use bright lights to wake themselves up. So often they'll buy what are called light boxes. So if they need to get up in the middle of the night or when it's pitch black dark outside, they can sit in front of these light boxes, which mimics the sun, and it can dramatically reduce their melatonin levels so they feel more awake during the night or in the very early hours of the morning. So shift workers often have no choice but to sleep during the day, especially if they're on night shift. So wearing dark glasses or an eye mask to bed will block out sunlight, all right, and allow the SCN to receive the darkness that it needs so people can then easily or more easily sleep during the day. Another one that I'll add to that as well are roller shutters or blockout curtains. They're often very, very helpful for shift workers, where it will completely block out the light or any sunlight and mimic that it is nighttime. So blockout curtains and roller shutters are highly recommended. If that's not possible, wearing dark glasses or an eye mask can be quite effective as well. Taking melatonin supplements may be helpful. The long-term effects of this are not quite known yet. At the moment, it seems to be quite safe. Ideally, though, not taking any supplements is what is, desired. But melatonin supplements may make a person more sleepy when they need to sleep during the day and may be more effective for shift workers. So shift workers should take short naps because often, again, they don't have a choice. So we're recommended they should take short naps either throughout the day or where possible on their shift, especially if it's night shift. So just 20-minute naps, just so they've got enough energy to make it through the next 2 to 3 or 4 hours of their shift is actually recommended. This is also very common practice amongst the medical field, where there'll be designated rooms for doctors and nurses to take short naps. This is also quite common for pilots. So they will often rotate the shifts. So the captain can take a short nap, the co-captain or the co-pilot can take a short nap, and so on and so forth. So that's often standard practice in a lot of industries. So shift workers can use caffeinated drinks to keep themselves awake. It may be a good strategy in order for them to have enough energy to drive to work or drive home from work. Obviously not too much, so becoming dependent on caffeinated drinks or drinking too much then may lead to more problems with sleep deprivation when they need to sleep during the day. So drinking caffeinated drinks in order to drive home safely or get to work safely is recommended, but obviously don't be dependent too much on caffeinated drinks, because when the time comes to sleep during the day or sleep for a long period of time, too much caffeine, as we know, will interrupt that process. And during the day, sleeping in a dark, quiet environment, as I said before. So roller shutters and blockout curtains are wonderful for shift workers because it will block out a lot of daylight and allow the retinas to recognize darkness, send a message to the SCN that it is nighttime, and release the correct amount of melatonin from the pineal gland so they are more easily allowed or are able to sleep during the day. So that is my revision video on fatigue as it relates to the road toll and shift work. I hope you found this useful. As always, any questions, let me know.